welcome to another live episode of the
Geek
Buddies.
Hey! By live, I mean like we're recording it live. You're not watching it live, so don't start trying to look for the chat. It is not a necessarily live episode, but we record it live, so that's how I'm getting away with that. So I'll say live to tape. Does that make everybody happy? Does that make you happy? Well, we're going to do that.
You just had a whole fight with yourself. That was impressive.
You guys, welcome to my world 24/7. This is an incredible day. I'm excited to have this fun conversation today because we have started to drop the Geek Buddies reciting with this episode. Start dropping them now on Wednesdays. The day we record, boom, it's right out just an hour later for people to enjoy. So, I've had to move some things around with the schedule, with the stuff that I've got going on. So this makes sense for the Geek Buddies. Plus, it feels like we're topical because we're talking about things that are happening in the first part of the week. A lot of fun to discuss and a lot of stuff to get into. I am John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, and host here on the Outlaw Nation.
I am Michael Vogel, and whether it is Wednesday or Thursday, I am a writer and producer of animated TV shows and content.
And this is Shannon McClung. I'm an animation writer and a topical television actor where you may have seen me on Brooklyn Nine-Nine, The Goldbergs, and Silicon Valley.
Nice. And we got a lot of stuff to get into today. We're going to talk about that, of course, that DC situation that happened there at DC Universe and DC Comics. That's going to be our main topic. But for those of you who are new, thank you for downloading us and, of course, listening to us if you're listening to us on the podcast channel as well. Thanks for taking a chance on us there. For those of you who are not new, welcome back. Thank you so much for staying on the Geek Buddies train. But for the new people, this is how the show works. Each of us presents a geek news item in the first half of the show. We discuss it amongst ourselves for your entertainment, and then we take a little bit of a mini break on the YouTube side of things, which is about a 5-second break. On the podcast side of things, a little bit longer for our sponsors to jump in and talk about things that help our show, and then we'll jump into our main topic, as I mentioned, the DC stuff. So I can't wait to get into it, and who wants to start with us first? Who wants to start first?
I will start. Okay. So pretty big news in the animation to live action world, in the Netflix world, in the streaming world. In the world of Airbenders, it's big news. It was announced today that Michael DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko, who were the creators of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra on Nickelodeon, and who up to this point have been attached to the live action Netflix reboot that everyone's been really excited about, are no longer attached to the live action reboot. DiMartino wrote on his page today that a lot of you have been asking about updates on the live action Avatar, and I'm sad to say that as of June, the two of us have left. And so this is really, really big news because everyone who's been really, really excited about the live action reboot, Avatar: The Last Airbender, just recently the animated version premiered on Netflix during this lovely quarantine of 2020 to huge numbers, huge popularity. I know that our own Geek Buddy Shannon McClung recently went through and watched it and was a really big fan. And Legend of Korra is launching, I believe, like next week. So Avatar coming to Netflix has been a really big deal. Clearly, they wanted to bring the animated shows over because they are very excited about this live action reboot. But with the two creators kind of exiting over, they don't really say specifically what they're leaving, but they did say that we expressed how excited we were for the opportunity to be at the helm. Unfortunately, things did not go as we had hoped. They said that the live action adaptation, of course, has the potential to be good. It might turn out to be a show many fans end up enjoying, but what they can be certain about is that whatever version ends up on screen, it will not be what they had envisioned or intended to make. So, of course, this has many, many Avatar fans very, very upset and concerned today. What are your guys' thoughts, Shannon, as a newfound fan of Avatar: The Last Airbender? And Johnny, even though you, I believe, have not watched all of the series, just how do you feel about, the original creators? Everyone was very excited about them being attached, and now they've stepped away.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'm struggling to think of a project in recent memory where an original creator has stepped away and things have turned out well. Obviously, it's going to be a different show. Like, my guess is that Netflix did not want to do a line-for-line adaptation. When that happens, you might get a stale product because your audience knows every line of that story right there. I mean, I think was what was sort of the detriment of the first two Harry Potter films, was this over reverence to the fact that it kind of stifled the creative process. Like, it was literally like we've seen everything beat for beat before. So it'll be interesting to see because one, I don't know if they've said on Netflix, is it going to be an hour? Is it going to be half an hour? I mean, things have to change, but just the fact that that statement that he made where it said this could turn out well, but it's not going to be the thing that we wanted to make or that we intended to make. So there's a lot of subtextual shade in that statement. But yeah, I mean, I'm halfway through season 2 right now, and it took a second for me to get on board because I'm not a big fan of the animation style. But the storytelling is fantastic. And after the, Shyamalan film, I imagine the fans would really like to see a live action version that can do what the animated version did.
Yeah, I think it's dangerous. I mean, you bring up Shyamalan. I think that's a fair comparison to make in this situation because, of course, he took it over for the live action movie, and that is considered one of the worst movies ever made. Certainly something that insulted the fans in the long run and almost sank Shyamalan's career forever. To be honest with you, it was that kind of a debacle of a film. So you step in, you bring these people in. And the thing is, why do you bring them in if you're not going to legitimately try to make sure that they are the point people for this whole thing? Why not learn from that 2000 movie that was such a mistake? And if you got all these people involved and they're so excited, blah, 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 why not have the main two guys steer this thing to port? I don't understand what the situation might be here. Maybe Netflix felt that there was financial issues here with what they wanted to do with it. Maybe they felt it wasn't 100% where they wanted to go with it. I don't know what the ratings were with that Dark Crystal thing, but it was pretty well received. So they certainly have a track record of rebooting older properties and making them work in that way. But I don't like the vibe. And of course, across the board, as I'm looking here at some of the reactions, many of the fans who are verified fans, voiceover actors who've been involved in this, they voice a very strong displeasure about this situation. And you're right, that statement, Shannon, he said, one of the creators said, this is, it might turn out to be good, but it ain't going to be what we intended. And that's kind of a huge hole to shoot in a ship like this. So Netflix is going to have to work double time to make sure this doesn't fail. Mike?
It's funny. I think I have a slightly different take on things. Definitely when I heard the news, I was disappointed. I was really excited that they were involved in the show, obviously, being such a huge fan of Avatar and of Korra. But, this show was announced by Netflix in 2018. I think that's when they released the first kind of concept art image of Aang and Appa. People flipped out. They were super excited about it, super excited that the original creative team was involved. And then we didn't hear anything about it. And long before, COVID kind of blew everything up and we were in a pandemic, like you would have thought you would have heard something, you would have gotten some updates, we would have, anything, any news. And there hasn't been anything. So it's definitely been a long process of sort of working on the show. And the one thing I will say is that there is a difference in the way you handle, write, create, produce an animated show and the way you do live action. And kind of to Shannon's point, there's a difference between a 22-minute action adventure show and an hour-long Netflix show. I mean, there's a lot of transitions to be made. I don't think even the most diehard Avatar fan, like Shannon said, doesn't want to see a line-by-line, moment-for-moment, beat-by-beat adaptation. And I am not saying by any stretch of the imagination that is what they were planning on doing. I don't know what they were planning. I'm sure it was really, really cool. But I do think that when you look at things like Umbrella Academy, I'm trying to think of some other things that are based on pre-existing material that we really, really enjoy, but like where things were based on something, but the creators take them in very different directions. Magicians on Sci-Fi. I mean, like where they take the original material and Watchmen. A new creator creates a different, Watchmen, like where you take it in a very different perspective. Yeah. And I do think, I'm not saying that this is by any means a good move or a great thing for the show. It's definitely, to your point, it never looks good when the original creators come out and say, hey, whatever's going to happen, it's not what we intended. But I don't necessarily think that means all hope is lost with Avatar.
Right.
I think that there are a lot of reasons why what they would have wanted to do or what their vibe is or what their aesthetic was might not have worked with the Netflix, the Umbrella Academies, the Stranger Things of the world. So I think that there's a potential that they just kind of needed a fresh perspective. I also think that it's hard particularly when you are the creator of something, and particularly when what you've created is so good and so beloved and so just great. I mean, like Avatar from the beginning to the end is one of my all-time favorite stories, and Korra is also one of my favorite stories in animation. And I think when you created something that's so perfect, where every moment is really earned and every moment is great, and then you move to a different medium where you're like, we want you to do that again, but we want you to do it totally differently than you did it before. That's a really hard challenge. And I can see the frustration of two people saying, well, this is why we did what we did, and this is why we want it to be the way we want it. And someone else saying, cool, but we've seen that already. Let's see something in a different way. So, you know, it's, again, I'm not saying I think this is a good thing. I'm not saying that what they were planning on doing was going to be bad by any stretch of the imagination. But I am saying that I think that this could just be creative differences in a way that doesn't necessarily paint Netflix or anyone working on the show in a bad light. It could have just been a challenging situation.
Right. And there's something to be said for a creator being precious with their creation. I mean, you can be too close to something. I mean, something really interesting coming out with Sandman. With they have the Audible series, but at the same time, Neil Gaiman is developing it as a series for Netflix. And in an interview, the Audible version is pretty much a direct adaptation of what he did. Whereas with the Netflix series, he's taking some lessons he learned from Good Omens over at Amazon Prime and is applying them to Netflix and seeing how, well, this is how we have to adapt it for this medium.
Right. And I think he said like he went to like showrunner boot camp on Good Omens. That and I think actually, Shannon, that's like a perfect example. Like what I love about the Audible version of Sandman is it is literally the comic book. I mean, you could listen to it and you are updated. That is exactly what happens, line for line, page for page in the comic. And he kind of did that because that's his ultimate version, knowing that whatever happens with the series is not going to be that. So yeah, I think that could be bad news. Could be not bad news. It's not good news by any stretch, but I think that it might just say that we're going to get a very different take on the characters that we love in live action, which doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a bad take. Yeah,
and I think the dangerous thing you look at here, if you're Netflix, though, and Mike, I get your point totally, and I understand what Shannon's saying too about being too precious about something you create. But if you're already alienating the fandom that is at a fervent pitch right now, and new people coming aboard as Shannon did watching it, and I know a couple of friends who've like been tearing through it over the last couple of weeks and talk about it openly, how much they love it. You could risk some bad blood here, and I think we'd have to find out who the showrunners are that are going to take over and what their track record is. So they've certainly put themselves in a tough position, Netflix has, with this decision. Then again, though, Netflix has rarely made a colossal mistake in their stuff. You could argue Bright with Max Landis. Certainly there's an issue there, but they rarely make those kinds of mistakes. So maybe they saw something here. And you're right, Mike. Maybe these guys couldn't recapture, and maybe they were defaulting back to what they had used before and didn't understand that there were differences here that they had to kind of negotiate. Or maybe they couldn't recapture the magic, and Netflix felt like eventually, look, we got to get rid of these guys, or we're not going to make this thing come to life the way we think it could come to life for our audience in the 2020s. Yeah. So that's a possibility as well. And there's nothing wrong with that because they bought it. They're putting the money up. They have a right to remove the show creator or the showrunners if they feel it's not going in the right direction.
And it does sound like, I mean, it just, at least based on the information we have thus far, it doesn't necessarily sound like Netflix got rid of them so much they made the decision to walk away.
Yeah, but you know it's Hollywood. I'm saying
you never know.
You know.
I'm saying you never know. And I'm saying just as I'm saying that I have no idea what their vision for Avatar was, and we could easily get to a couple years from now where we get another live action version that does not live up to the animation, and we will all say, fuck, maybe they were right. Maybe that is the way to go. It's true. I guess what I'm saying is, having been on the creative side of things and having been on the executive corporate side of things, I definitely probably have, I don't want to say sympathy, but I have more of a perspective where I can see both sides of the situation. I have been in situations where you have had creators that are super passionate about their vision, super passionate about what they want to do, and you just know that it's not going to work because of A, B, C, D, or E. And so I think that in just reading between the lines of what was said here, there clearly was dissatisfaction creatively on the creator's part. But there's a lot of reasons why that could be.
And it clearly must have hit a breaking point because they said, we don't want to do this, but we feel it's the only way that we feel like we have to do this. So clearly there had been attempts to make it work, and then in the end, it just was not a tenable situation.
And kind of to your point about not knowing, I'm sure that you're right. Like Netflix has to know that this doesn't look good. It doesn't make the fans excited about the show. So I think that to your point, whether it was the creators who clearly love this world that they created walking away, or Netflix deciding that this wasn't going to work and walking away, whichever way it really went down, it clearly was not a decision that was made lightly, because it doesn't look good for anybody at the moment.
True, very true. And we'll see. We'll keep tabs on it and see what the updates are, I'm sure, on the show, as both you are massive fans. I've got to get into the show at some point. I'm sure I'm going to have to sit down on Saturday and just relax, put my feet up and watch it, take a little bit of ridicule from my girlfriend that I'm watching an animated series, and just deal with it and watch it. So I need to get on that. If
she'll sit down with you for a couple episodes, she'll get hooked too. And then you as well, Shannon, are both going to love Korra. So I'm actually super excited. Once you guys get done with it, maybe we can do a little Avatar/Korra discussion.
Cool. We'll see. Could be fun. Yeah, that's a good idea. Look, I barely got her into Umbrella Academy, so I'm okay with that victory. All right, what do we got next?
All right, we got news this week that there are two big television properties that are going to be making the leap to a somewhat different medium. First, we found out that on Deadline that James Wan and Spyglass Media are teaming up to do a big screen version of Knight Rider. So I imagine most of our audience knows, but it was the early 80s series that starred David Hasselhoff as Michael Knight with a car that could talk named Kit. So that show ran for a few years. It certainly propelled David Hasselhoff to stardom. There have been many attempts over the years to do a reboot of Knight Rider. They actually did a syndicated version. I want to say it was in like 98 called Team Knight Rider, which it was sort of the next generation of crime fighting cars. And then they actually had the NBC reboot in 08 that was real bad. Yeah. So now they are trying to do a big screen version, which James Wan, I think that could be interesting. The second TV property, which shockingly is like, wow, this actually looks like it could be really good, is Will Smith and Overbrook are talking about doing a dramatic 1 hour Fresh Prince reboot. So about a year ago, a gentleman named Morgan Cooper made like a 2 or 3 minute sort of teaser for what a dramatic Fresh Prince of Bel-Air series could look like, just calling it Bel-Air. I remember watching the trailer at the time and I'm like, oh, that's funny. I watched it again after I read the news that there actually are in negotiations with a couple of big streamers, and watched it again. I'm like, God, this actually looks like it could be really good. So Morgan Cooper, the guy who did the original trailer, he's going to be directing, I think, the pilots, and he's also going to be writing with a guy named Chris Collins, who very well-known writer, wrote on The Wire, wrote on Clone Wars, wrote on The Man in the High Castle. So I certainly have individual feelings about both of these projects, but I'm curious to get your guys' takes first.
I will handle the Knight Rider one real quick. I'm excited about it, because I'm of that age that grew up with Knight Rider and loved it. By the way, I didn't know the Knight Rider got shot in the face. I had no idea that was part of the whole situation. I don't know how that skipped me, but I was just like, wait, he got shot in the face? Like, I literally was reading it going, wait a minute, when did this happen? So
they took his face off.
Exactly. It's been a while. Speaking of John Woo, it's been a while since I did that, since I thought about that. So it was great to hear that. And look, they've tried over and over again to try to make this work, as Shannon said. But I'm excited because TJ Fixman is involved here. TJ Fixman is a really cool writer. I got a chance to interview him way back when with Yuri Lowenthal when we did our cast of characters or our Super Animation Game Time show where we interviewed people in animation. And TJ certainly has a long history in animation and writing and what have you. So I'm excited about it. I sent a DM to him and I told him, like, do right by us who are Knight Rider fans. He's like, I am taking this task on and I know it's a heavy task, but I'm excited to see what it can do. And of course, without missing a beat, he also tweeted out about a few hours later, guys, please stop sending me ideas for Knight Rider. I'm going to handle it. I'll figure it out. So clearly there are people who still love this property all these years later are excited to see it. So that's my thing. The Will Smith, the Bel-Air thing sounds interesting. I don't know if I see it as a drama. Didn't they try that with a little bit with 90210, make it a little more dramatic? Riverdale certainly did that with the Archie situation, making it a bit more dramatic. I don't know where they're going to go. And is Will Smith going to be the new Uncle Phil? Is his character coming back as the new Uncle Phil? I don't know. So I don't feel as excited about that prospect as I do the Knight Rider thing. Mikey?
Well, first on Knight Rider, I'm going to say I got in trouble in elementary school because for about maybe 3 or 4 weeks for show and tell, instead of bringing anything in for show and tell, I would stand up and recite the plot of what had happened on Knight Rider that week. And finally, my teacher told me that I should maybe change things up instead of coming in and telling the entire class exactly what had happened on Knight Rider. That like literally would stand up and be like, okay, for show and tell, here's what happened. Kit was driving, Michael, like I would just like go through the episode. So I was clearly a fan. That being said, I think maybe because there's been so many versions of this, I'm kind of like, okay, we'll see. I mean, James Wan definitely is going to make it a sight to behold. Fast and the Furious is definitely one of the biggest, most successful brands that we have in the world. So a James Wan Fast and Furious with a talking car, it's like, yeah, okay, like let's see what happens. I would probably say I'm looking at that one like with a side eye. I'm kind of giving it a little bit like, I don't know, we'll see. Now, Johnny, I would say that I was with you about the Fresh Prince news until I actually went and watched the 4-minute trailer that Morgan Cooper had done that had kind of inspired this whole thing. And I got to say, like, when you watch this 4-minute trailer, because I had not seen it when it had come out. So, like, I heard the Fresh Prince, like, I literally heard they're making a drama of Fresh Prince. And I was like, what the hell are you talking about? And then read the article and saw what it was inspired from and watched the trailer. And the trailer does such a great job. It does this really, really cool thing where it's equal parts diving into the serious undertone of what the plot of Fresh Prince is. That there is you were a black kid growing up in a lower income neighborhood and getting in trouble, and your mom shipped you off to like literally the least black place in the world, Bel Air. And this was the life you lead. And in the world that we're living in today, where we're talking about privilege, we're talking about systemic racism, we're talking about all of these issues that we're talking about, it actually, oddly enough, Fresh Prince, for as silly and amazing and fun as it was when we were all growing up, actually does sort of set a stage for these issues. But the other part that the trailer did really well is it had all these little fun nods to the show, whether it was like Carlton's dancing or all these little moments that you were like, oh, like this person is clearly a fan of the show, like knows the show inside and out. And because of that is kind of bringing out these other elements. And so I'll say that like, I actually am oddly way more excited about Fresh Prince than a serious take on Fresh Prince than I would have thought that I would have been.
Okay.
Well, at the same time, Knight Rider, I'm kind of like,
I mean, the Knight Rider of it all, to me, that seems like such a no-brainer. Like it's one of those properties that I'm like, why has this been so difficult to crack? It seems like it would be a fairly easy undertaking to be like, this is the feature that you have an ex-LAPD detective who has a different face, and now he's working for this flag, the Foundation for Law and Government, which I think is a terrible a secret law enforcement organization. It surprises me that it's so hard to get that right. But also the thing that gives me pause is the James Wan of it. I mean, again, we all know my love of Aquaman, and the movie was, I was like, wow, that was a lot. It was I'm happy that we got it. I'm happy that it did well. I'm happy that we're going to get a sequel. But the lack of focus and for what I consider to be some unimaginative action. I was like, I don't know. I was like, not that I have a soft spot for Knight Rider, but I'm kind of like, I don't know. Maybe you're better as the horror guy. Maybe you're not an action adventure guy. With Bel Air, I'm absolutely with Mike. I mean, if you look back at the original sitcom, they did touch upon those serious themes quite a bit. I mean, when Will and Carlton were pulled over and taken to jail, Will's complicated relationship with his father, who kind of comes in and out of his life. It seems like once you get past the 90s of it all, it seems like a natural fit for a dramatic retelling.
Well,
go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead, Johnny.
I got two questions. Do we get Aunt Viv coming back as a villain? The original actress who's really got a hard on for like killing this thing. I think that'd be awesome. Second thing is this. Remember the interesting thing about this show is that his family was blatantly Republican. And so in this 2020, I wonder what they do with that. Would you have black Trump Republicans, MAGA black voters for Trump? Would that be possible? What would those conversations be like? And I almost feel like you have to do that in order to really play into the drama of what could pop up in a situation like this. So that would be interesting too, as well.
Yeah. Or I mean, make them Lincoln Project Republicans.
Yeah, maybe, certainly.
I mean, The Good Fight on CBS All Access actually deals with that exact subject, like where you have black Republican Trump voters versus liberal black voters, and actually create some really interesting dynamics. So I think you're right. The one thing I was going to say, based on what Shannon was saying, and I think this is the undercurrent of where my issue sort of lies on the Knight Rider front, which is I think that in the 80s, whether it was movies or TV, it was like everybody did a lot of cocaine, and whatever got thrown against the wall got thrown against the wall. You want to have someone who got shot in the face and has a talking car? Great. You're a cop and you get turned into a robot, but you sort of remember your life from before. RoboCop in. You are working in a department store and your inspiration is a mannequin who's really someone from ancient Egypt who was cursed, played by Kim Cattrall. Sure, sounds awesome. Like, let's go on vacation and the guy who owns the house is dead, but we're going to pretend he's alive all weekend. Great. Like, it was just like crazy town, and ideas just kind of got thrown at the wall, and we all grew up being like, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but this is all great. Where we're at today, really is. Wait a
minute. Are you going to a place where you're trying to say that today we're a little more rational or a little more relaxed?
Listen, we got Fast and the Furious where people are doing superpowers in cars and like flying through the air. I'm not saying we're more rational. And definitely when it comes to our big budget summer tentpole movies, like we are all about spectacle. But I think the things that really cut through, I think the things that we get really excited about, the things that go on our most beloved lists, the things that we get really, really, really passionate about, I do think that there is an element of like, well, what is this story? Whether it is dudes in capes, people with lightsabers, like whatever it is, like what is this really about? Like what are some of the ideas, the themes that we're diving in underneath? And with the announcement about Fresh Prince, you are getting right off the bat, like you look at the trailer, you see what they're talking about, and it is easy to take what that show was and lots of questions. Are they going to be Republicans? Are you going to deal with this? Are you going to touch on this? But there is a wealth of stuff that is hitting the exact sweet spot of everything that we are talking about right now. And with Knight Rider, it's like, hey guys, it's Knight Rider. James Wan's doing it. But like, what does Knight Rider really say? And I think with all the versions of Knight Rider that have come along, you sort of get this thing that like Knight Rider wasn't saying a lot aside from a talking car is fucking cool, which absolutely accurate. But I think that for Knight Rider to sort of like cut through at all in today's day and age with everything that we have available to watch to us, there's got to be a little bit more there. And they might absolutely be planning that. But thus far, I haven't really heard anything about that. And I would say that when it comes to James Wan, I'm not overly confident in here is the Knight Rider subtext that's really going to make us think about things. This is the guy that gave us the octopus playing drums in Aquaman. Like, I don't know.
No, I think it's a fair criticism. Absolutely.
Pump the brakes.
I see the DC people jumping. I go, what about the ant playing drums at the end of Ant-Man and Wasp? Yeah, all right, comment.
That ant clearly was very good at drums.
And it was a post-credit scene. It meant nothing. This is also, we'll jump on to the next topic because we got to get going, but this seems like perfectly made for CBS. They've rebooted Hawaii Five-0 to success for years. Yeah. They rebooted, currently SWAT is doing well with Shamar Moore. So they have certainly an ability to reboot these kind of old school shows and have them have a serious bend to them, but with a little bit of humor sprinkled throughout. And the people will the people who are older who watch CBS like to watch those shows. So there is a possibility where this is where it lands on something like CBS. I'd be surprised if it goes Netflix or Amazon
it could
Prime
be a huge win for Peacock as well, though. I mean, like Fresh Prince originally aired on NBC.
That's good.
I mean, it was an NBC show, and like this is exactly the kind of thing that Peacock
both of them were NBC shows.
The Peacock could crow about if they got the rights to it.
No.
All right. Well,
you like Peacock's thing. All right, let's move on. What's our last? I had to. All right, let's move on to our last story before we jump into the break. It's kind of the biggest story, I think, of the things we're talking about, and that is Captain Marvel 2. We have ourselves a director for Captain Marvel 2. It's Nia DaCosta there. You see, she is taking over the reins of Captain Marvel 2, taking over from Ryan Fleck and Anna Boden, who were the directors of the first film. I think the three of us have been very clear. Not our favorite MCU film. No. Certainly, Brie Larson does a better job, in my opinion, in Avengers Endgame than she does in Captain Marvel, but she certainly has some great scenes in Captain Marvel to show what she can do with that character. I think a lot of people felt that Fleck and Boden didn't quite step up to the plate with their version of Captain Marvel, even though it made $1 billion. So they're set for life. If they made that contract correctly, both those directors are set for the rest of their lives. Now coming in, though, I like this idea of Nia DaCosta coming in. She's a younger director. She's you can see she's a black woman there directing this. I love that vibe to it, maybe giving a little more, a different perspective, an interesting perspective to explore with Carol Danvers and Lashana Lynch's character, Monica Rambeau. What are we going to get there? And also, I like the idea that she's done smaller, more independent films. I think, what was it called? Little Woods. I think it was the one with Lily Allen and Tessa Thompson. So which is on Amazon, which is on Hulu right now. So if you want to watch it and see what this woman can do as a director, go and watch that movie. That movie is actually damn good. And so seeing what she steps into this role to do, I'm excited about, because once again, these are independent film directors coming in, and the core of independent film is the relationship between the characters. Can you establish this strongly and then build the world out from there? So with Captain Marvel, this will be an interesting challenge for her, because where we left off, it's galaxy time. We have Sword up there with Samuel L. Jackson. We've got Krolls. We've got Scree. We got all kinds of stuff going on. So did
you just say Krolls and Scree?
Yeah, is that a mix? Is that a wrong thing to say?
You were so close there.
Creeds and Skrulls. That was
Skrulls and Creeds.
Skrulls and Creeds. Oh, sorry, guys. Sorry. The haircut's got me all messed up. Anyway, it's got the things that are there. So I want to see what she can do, but I think it's really smart to choose a director like this, because if you're going to go out into the galaxy, you can get lost in the spectacle of it all. We just mentioned James Wan. Aquaman is lost in the spectacle of it all. I don't think it does a good job of having very strong relationships between the characters and make you believe those connections, other than the father and the son with Tamura Morrison and Jason Momoa. So I want to see what she does with this. What do you guys think about this? Do you like this idea with her stepping in?
Well, I have not seen Little Woods. I knew that she had directed the upcoming Candyman with Yahya Abdul-Mateen, and that there was that Candyman short that is out. That is like a 2 or 3 minute sort of a promo for the movie. Yeah. Visually, that Candyman short is really, really cool. Like it's basically kind of done in shadow puppets almost. One of the things that stuck with me from Captain Marvel, and not that Boden and Fleck were the only voices in the room here, was the lack of imagination visually from like the Kree homeworld. It was very kind of paint by numbers. And if you've seen Mrs. America on FX, which Boden and Fleck were EPs on, and they also directed a handful of episodes, that's probably more their strength. Something a little more real. And
it's great. I mean, like just to give them credit, because like we sort of knock on them for Captain Marvel, which I agree with everything you're saying, but like it's great.
Yes.
Miss America, yeah.
I mean, got a bunch of Emmy nods for acting. I mean, there are some great performances in there. Yeah. But looking at what Nia DaCosta did visually with this 2 minutes gives me a lot of hope for what can happen, sort of not to John's point, with the spectacle of Captain Marvel. Because I think that was something that was lost in the first one. I'm like, this is very paint by numbers action. And not that you can put it all on Boden and Fleck, but if she brings in a unique visual take the way she did with the Candyman short, I think we're probably in very good hands.
Yeah. Look, as Johnny didn't say spectacle was bad, he said that certain directors get lost in the spectacle. Yes. And I think that, to your point, and hopefully she won't, but I actually agree with everybody who's saying. I didn't see Little Woods yet. I keep meaning to go check it out because I want to see it. But I was very excited by this for 2 reasons. One, what you said, which is I Candyman scared the ever-living shit out of me when I saw it as a kid. For some reason, that movie freaked me out. I literally cannot to this day stand in front of a mirror and say Candyman's name 3 times. Like, I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna do it. But Candyman, the plot of Candyman gets a little problematic in the way that it deals with slavery and some other things. And right off the bat, first of all, to your first point, Shannon, I think that the short that she did and just even the trailer for Candyman itself, I was jazzed to see it, not only because that character scares the shit out of me, but it was a super interesting take that visually you could tell right away, like this was going to look really cool, which I just recently went back out of sheer quarantine boredom and was watching Captain Marvel on Disney Plus. And it's not that it's bad. Like, it's a fine movie.
Oh, yeah, sure. It's
like
fine.
Everything that happens is fine. I think the dynamic between Brie Larson and Sam Jackson is one of the highlights. I think the Skrulls are really cool. Like, kind of the twist that the Skrulls aren't the bad guys. Like, there's a lot of really good stuff in Captain Marvel. And I think that just kind of visually and dynamically, it wasn't that visually exciting. And so looking at what DaCosta does, at least in the Candyman trailer, like, I think that that's automatically a win. And kind of to what I was saying previously about the difference between Fresh Prince and Knight Rider and that desire that I have for things to be about something, you can also tell from Candyman, the reboot trailer, that they are taking some of the problematic issues of the original and how it dealt with slavery and going, we're flipping all of this on its head, and we are clearly going to say some things. Which in that sort of Jordan Peele kind of way with Get Out and Us is exactly what you would expect from like that genre of kind of new Jordan Peele horror. But I think so taking someone who sort of tackled something like that and bringing her over to Captain Marvel is just like, from a visual standpoint and from a sort of what's underneath the hood standpoint, from a storytelling, it just seems like this is exactly the stuff that I was missing. And so if you can keep the stuff that was kind of working fine with the first one, but add those other elements to it, I think that hopefully, and I think we all said this about Captain Marvel a few times, that hopefully Captain Marvel, I'm glad it did as well as it did, because hopefully it will get us to a Captain Marvel 2 that I can get really excited about.
Yeah, agreed. And, like you mentioned earlier, Shannon, the fact that Jordan Peele's kind of anointed her and handed her the Candyman franchise gives you confidence, considering what Jordan Peele's been able to create. And we're on the heels of Lovecraft Country coming out, I think, this weekend.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, with Jonathan Majors. So seeing what Jordan creates there is interesting as well. So I'm excited by it, and it's good to get new. And I'm loving the people of color are getting into these positions and doing the job, and with the same credentials that other people who are not of color received opportunities to do things. So this is not a thing of like, oh, they're just doing it to give a black woman a chance. No, they're doing it because this person has the same resume as someone else, and that someone else has been given numerous opportunities. So let's see what she can do. Let's see what he can do and what they can create. So I'm excited by that overall. And Captain Marvel seems like the perfect place for her to kind of see what she can do with an MCU property. So, all right, well, let's take a little bit of a break, and we'll jump into our main topic right after this.
What?
I don't know what that is. What is that? What are you doing?
Oh, Knight Rider.
Oh, nice. You
Bum.
still remember that? All I remember is.
You should not add TV theme songing to your resume.
Oh.
I can't help your all's memories. That was
That's a fair point.
Impersonation.
All right. Well, let's get into our main topic here. I think all three of us want to dive into this. Mikey, do you want to take this one, or would you like me to kind of drop the facts and then we'll go from there? What are you feeling on this?
I mean, look, we had some big news in the comic book world this week, and I guess in sort of broader comic entertainment, but DC Comics and DC in general was sort of decimated this week. As of Monday, it was announced that the company reportedly laid off about 1/3 of its editorial team. Most of the people working for DC Universe streaming site were let go. DC collection. What was the DC Collectors group? DC Direct was
DC
pretty
Direct.
much shuttered down. Hearing that a bunch of the executives for DC TV and DC Features and everything, like there's clearly been a comic book culling of epic proportions. And nobody really knows what it means. It kind of came out of nowhere. But people are saying that with Warner Media and AT&T, which owns Warner Media, does this mean that they're getting rid of comics completely? What does this mean for DC Comics? What does this mean for DC Entertainment? What does this mean for DC Universe? Although I think that's pretty clear. The writing's on the wall and it's been on the wall for a while. Yeah. And what does this all mean happening so close in proximity to the DC Fandom event, which is coming out just in a couple of weeks, really?
Yeah, 20 seconds.
And so tons of news there. Lots of people gone, lots of major high up people gone from DC, and everybody is still kind of questioning what this means in general for everything moving forward.
Yeah, you talk about the big wigs here. Editor-in-Chief Bob Harris, Senior VPs Hank Canals and Bobby Chase, editors Mark Doyle, Brian Cunningham, Andy Corey. Those are the ones that have been let go here. Looking at, was it Mike Avila over here at Sci-Fi Wire asking the question, why do this now 2 weeks before the DC Fandom event? Short-term pain for long-term goals seems to be in play here. He says, as one source explained to me, if you're running Warner Brothers, why not write off all the expenses related to these job cuts and gutting DC Universe during this year of unprecedented challenges and start fresh in 2021. Pretty much everyone from DC Universe was let go. And you said, Mike, we saw this coming, but it's such an interesting look to make this decision now, 2 weeks before, or less than 2 weeks before the DC Fandom event. And you wonder how much of that residue is going to be out for people to comment on and speak about. I already have a number of friends who've worked at DC Daily, worked at DC with DC people here who would let go. Some of the people would let go, and they tweeted out messages of support for these people. So certainly this touches a lot of people in this industry. It's such a massive number. I think our friend, I don't want to out who our friends said, like 580 people were possibly fired from which is mind blowing to think about that many people, and your company is still standing no problem. This overall, this just feels like we're going to cut everything, start all over, and see if our point of view under Warner Media and the new changes they're making work best for streamlining our profits, streamlining the running of this business. And you can't do this without, you can't talk about this and ignore the coronavirus implications of this as well. Across the entire entertainment landscape, you've seen companies, agencies make extreme cuts in their companies and in their agencies. CAA tossing out a bunch of agents. Certainly, William Morris completely shutting down their voiceover division. My personal experience and only keeping celebrities on to do voiceover, nothing else. That kind of stuff, you see it happening all over the place, and it stems from mismanagement. Also stems from mismanagement of the coronavirus situation from the top of the country down. So this is all connected in some interesting way. What do you think about, Shannon?
Yeah, I mean, DC is not alone in the fact that there are companies cutting costs across the board. I know NBC Universal has done, I believe, two rounds of layoffs, not to the extent that DC has, where it was, around 600 people just bang gone, and also not in a lead up to a very, very big promotional event, which is probably the biggest promotional event we may get this year. And I know the fans are certainly excited. I'm very excited to see what happens. Yeah. The DC universe of it all, the writing has kind of been on the wall for a little bit for them. That was a streamer that did not quite deliver the way they wanted it to deliver. And I do think there was probably some mismanagement there. I mean, I would have been a subscriber for DC Universe 100% if it had streamed on the PlayStation. Like, that's where I do all my streaming is my PS4. How you release a streaming service, and not make it accessible to gamers, to me, that is a huge, huge error. And I believe, was it before the layoffs that all of the Facebook pages for like Harley Quinn and for Titans, that they had changed their name from DC Universe's Titans to DC's Titans? Yeah. So it's not it's sad. I mean, it's never good news when this many people lose their jobs at once, especially in the climate that we're in right now. I mean, it's tragic. But hopefully some of that DC Universe programming is going to find another home on HBO Max. And hopefully once we get through this terrible virus, hopefully it's not too long for those people that did lose their jobs to find new ones.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that this isn't, I could be wrong. This doesn't feel like this is we're tightening things because of coronavirus. This was a decimation of the senior leadership of DC I mean, Jim Lee is still there, and Jim Lee, it looks like, is going to sort of be that conduit between comics and the rest of kind of Warner Entertainment. But I mean, it's a decimation. Like, this is not we've got to tighten up. This is, we're wiping the slate clean. So there's definitely more going on than just, what's happening in a lot of places. I also, sort of along the lines of what you're saying about DC Universe, DC Universe was a good idea that just was never going to deliver. And the moment that HBO Max was announced, it was clear that all things were going to flow to HBO Max. So already Harley Quinn is up there. Already Stargirl is up there. I mean, the few things that were on DC Universe that you couldn't get on HBO Max, like Young Justice and a handful of other things, I am sure that we will be seeing on HBO Max at any moment. But I guess the real questions that I have is I wonder, what was happening with DC, whether it be on the comic side or just in general, that the higher ups felt was being mismanaged? And then the second question that I'll be the one to ask, because I'm the one who's critical of DC all the time, are they wrong that it needs to be completely shifted and changed? No, that's that. And I will also want to point out that this is not just a DC issue. I mean, this is also coming on the heels of the news last week that both Bob Greenblatt and Kevin Reilly, two of the most high-up people as far as like Warner Content, HBO Max, and everything else, were also let go. And that there's some big shifts that everything at Warner Brothers in general right now, even beyond DC, is sort of shifting with a clear focus towards HBO Max and a clear focus towards taking a lot of the different sort of fiefdoms and sort of streamlining things. And I think this is just one more piece of that. But yeah, like I was saying, which Johnny was about to answer, when it comes to the way that DC Comics, DC Television, DC Features, the entire sort of ecosystem, and again, the closest thing that you compare it to is sort of the Disney Marvel ecosystem of comics and Marvel TV and everything else, which has also seen some big shifts and changes during the virus. Like, does DC need big changes? Like, what does this mean, and where could it go in the bad sense and in the good sense?
We're all our own corporations as human beings, right? Like, we have our own thing where we look at and go, okay, what's working for me? What isn't? What's making me happy? What isn't? What is making me money? What isn't? What is furthering me towards my goal and what isn't, And so in our own ways, we do these cullings, whether it's friends or food or entertainment or financial expenditures or anything else. We do that so that we can survive. And the company is in a way an extension of that. And something like Warner Media coming, AT&T coming in, all this deal, you knew changes were coming. The changes always come because that executives, the people in charge of other things, they do an analysis of a company and look at it and go, okay, these are the changes we need to make. Now, they'll lie when they come in and say, no, everyone's going to keep their job. We're going to reevaluate, blah, 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 blah. But the whole time they have ideas for what they're going to do because they think they can run it better. Mike Avila took further on what he said here in Sci-Fi Wire. He said it from another source of his with knowledge of the Warner Brothers operations. They told him, quote, Warner Media doesn't want to be in the comics business. It wants to be in the character business. The same source says that the company may have no longer wanted DC and its comics to be the driving force behind entities that are so important to WB franchising and licensing goals. They want comics and the characters related to the comics to be a small part of the necessary intellectual property maintenance needed to keep corporate cash cows like Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman humming along. So, I mean, this is a great point you bring up, Mike, this idea of, well, are they redirecting their efforts towards things that they see with the potential to make more money so that they can keep existing as a company long term, and maybe they're looking at, and comics has always been the redheaded stepchild of any company that is not just a comic books company. There's always that frustration of like, how do we make it work? How do we reboot these titles? Who do we bring in? Who do we take from another company to come in and help us do these things? So it's no surprise to see comics be one of the first things on the chopping block. What the source also says is they're looking at an esports person to come in and be an executive for Warner Media to handle the publishing and somehow appeal to the younger generation with its publishing and its approach. That's fascinating as well. I mean, this is not just a firing. This is, like you said, a restructuring completely. And maybe it wasn't coronavirus related, but maybe coronavirus is the umbrella they're using to do it under, or the shield they're using to do it under, so they can make these changes. And nothing says these changes will lead to a more profitable company. Absolutely nothing. You're just taking the chances to see if it will happen, but you have no idea. And you make a great point, Mike, like the history of them, success is failure, success, failure, success, failure over the last few years. It can be a bit frustrating, but it did feel like they had turned the corner after Wonder Woman, after Justice League, with Shazam, with the Joker movie, with other things that have come around from them. It felt like they were turning the corner overall, at least on that side of things. So I don't know. We'll see.
Well, what's interesting, looking at the streaming services, hindsight is 2020.
Of course.
You have the new streaming services. You have Disney Plus. You have HBO Max. You have Apple TV Plus. You have the recently launched Peacock. Yeah. No one has made a splash like Disney Plus. Now, a lot of that has to do with Disney's immense catalog.
True.
That you have all of the Disney films, you have all of the Pixar films, all of Marvel now, or the MCU rather, and they're starting to get more of those Fox, like the X-Men movies and whatnot. But also, they were the only one to debut with a big project in The Mandalorian, because if you compare catalogs, Disney to Warner, if it's not even, it's close, because Warner, between Harry Potter, between Lord of the Rings, between DC, between HBO, they have an immense catalog there as well. And it seems like, I think obviously they were on an accelerated timetable to get the service out, but there's no reason that they did not have a big project to debut with. Yes, they had Elmo. Yes, they had the new Looney Tunes, but maybe part of that restructuring is like, guys, why didn't you think of this?
Well, but also, and as we've talked about on the show, given the nature of the way that DC and Warner Brothers have handled their DCU movies, what was the big project they could have had? We already have a ton of DC television content through what airs on the CW. Stargirl and Titans and Doom Patrol had sort of like already had their big moment on DC Universe. So those were those things. What I think that you're kind of getting to the heart of what the issue is that DC was sort of over here operating in their own little world with DC Universe and just DC and solely DC. And I think that there was somewhere somebody being like, this little universe is actually part of a bigger universe. And we need that to work within our bigger universe. It doesn't mean necessarily, it could, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to gut DC and we're not going to get original stories in comics anymore and all comics creators are going to get the boot. DC Comics, for its part, it's gone through, at least for me as a fan in the past several years, whether it be from the New 52 into Rebirth and everything else, like it's gone through some massive shifts where everything has been shaken up so many times that you sort of get a little bit of whiplash. But I feel like in the past couple of years, they've gotten some really, really good stuff. I've talked about Tom King's run on Batman. I think Bendis doing Superman is really, really exciting. Like there's been some good things. So I don't think this necessarily, obviously, I think the sci-fi article that you were quoting, Johnny, and I think a couple others kind of are calling for the gloom and doom and like DC is going to not be in charge of its own destiny and it's a bunch of suits running things now. But I think that this might just be a little bit more of a shifting of priorities so that the cool and original stories that we hopefully will still get in comics will actually lead down a road that gets us to a better place where there is more synergy. And that doesn't necessarily mean, as much as I know that I rag on DC about this, this doesn't necessarily mean you have to do it the Marvel way. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have all your cool comic books, but then once you get beyond comic books that what happens on the Disney Plus shows ties into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and it's all one giant thing, and that's the story that we're telling. And even with Marvel, I think we saw in the past year, with the way that they sort of gutted Marvel animation, gutted Marvel television, there's clearly a desire to sort of move everything under that one entertainment vision and banner. And I'm not saying that DC has to do that, or that Warner Media and AT&T and everybody are saying that DC needs to do that. But I think that there is a need to be a bit more looking at the big picture than it seems like they've been thus far.
Yeah. I mean, that's a thing too to be looking at is what are they going to jump into the pool to make? What new approaches are they going to have that are going to yield the positive reactions and kind of overwhelm this idea of the culling that has happened here and make people feel good about it? I don't know if people, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think when people who are struggling to pay their rent, who are struggling to keep a job, who are unemployment because of they look at a company that does this, and maybe they don't feel a loyalty to that company. Maybe that affects the loyalty you feel there for that. I don't know. I just throw that out there as a possibility. I
want to put a pin in that statement.
Okay.
Right now, and hold on to that. I want to remember that we made this statement because I think we're going to call back to it in about 3 or 4 weeks, because I have a feeling, and I could be wrong about this, but I have a feeling that doing this, 2 weeks before DC Fandom?
Fandom,
I don't think that's entirely a coincidence.
Yeah.
I think, to your point, if you're going to do this thing where you are going to fire a massive amount of people and do this thing where every article that I'm reading is DC's gutted, DC's destroyed, DC as we know it is over. Well, if you're going to do that, it's probably a smart idea to have a giant event scheduled for about 2 weeks away where you can unveil this new vision for what you're planning on doing. Like, nobody knows what DC Fandom is going to be, but like, this is where they're supposed to reveal all this stuff. This is where we're going to find out all this information about where they're heading and what they're doing and the big things that are happening. And maybe put up some new executives, put up some new people that are going to talk about their bold new vision. And the reason I want to put a pin in what you said is because I think you're right that that's what people think today. But fans being fans, I have a feeling that if you put enough shiny objects in front of us 2 weeks from now and tell us all the cool things that we're going to get as soon as this virus is over and we're back to business as usual, I have a feeling people might be like, whatever I said 2 weeks ago, forget it. I'm on board.
Because it wasn't us that lost the jobs, right? I mean, so it's a great point. It might be us that benefits from seeing all this stuff and whatever. So I get it. You're right on that. But it's just a shame because I went through that earlier this year. It sucked. I
mean, don't get me wrong,
but it's life. But it's this business. It's life in this business, man.
Like people losing their jobs is shitty.
Yeah,
and people that are doing things that we as fans enjoy losing their jobs is also shitty. I mean, people like everything that's happening with all of these companies downsizing and all the things that are happening, like none of it is good. But taking a step back and looking at the big picture of where things are going, what a company's doing, how you're trying to like sort of get your house in order. These are the breaks. These are things. This is like what happens sometimes. And again, it's kind of like the same as the Avatar conversation is I'm not saying I think that this is all warranted or that it's smart or that studios and giant corporations always make the right decision, because that is unequivocally not true. You can look at the history of our industry and it's clearly not true. But I also think that particularly in the case of DC and DC Entertainment and the way that everything has been working for the past several years, I think it's also undeniable that there clearly doesn't seem to be a clear focus and a clear vision. And so we'll see.
Well, Rob Liefeld retweeted this from Jerry Conway. Jerry Conway is the co-creator of The Punisher, Firestorm, Power Girl, Vixen, and Ms. Marvel. And he said, this is what Jerry Conway tweeted: "What happened at DC Comics yesterday was probably inevitable. Once Warner Media became a subsidiary of a tech company, uninterested in creating new creative content and planning only to strip mine existing IP for streaming." So what you say there, Mike, bears fruit here with what he said, this idea that it's doom and gloom right now. And maybe the Fandom event will, make people forget it. But if they stumble through this Fandom event, or if things happen that are come out that aren't that well received, it could be a double shot for DC. You know, it's a hell of a tightrope to be walking at this time.
It also begs the question, because something that is absolutely true, but it's changing, and this is where another part of like the DC comics side and the publishing side is really challenged, is these big 10 companies might be wanting to come in and just strip mine the characters that you have and make as much money as they can make off of them and move on. But if they want to think longer term and they want this to really work and they want to have a strategy, comics is still where a lot of new ideas happen.
Great point.
At least on the Marvel side. and I don't mean that DC doesn't have good stuff, but look at the way that whether it be Miles Morales or Kamala Khan or anybody has come along in the past, like Marvel has done a better job taking some of these new characters and bringing them into the fold and rising them up to the point, or the Young Avengers or any of these characters where they have like elevated and are clearly in the wings waiting for a live action treatment in a way that DC has not done as successfully. It doesn't mean that DC doesn't have great stories in the comics. Like I think we talked about it here, like Brian Michael Bendis's Naomi, which was a limited run comic, I thought was spectacular. So I'm not dogging the creative juice in the comic side. I'm more dogging the synergy of the way things are going. But the other issue is people aren't buying comics. Yeah. Like we can talk about it all we want, but I don't know when the last time either of you went into a comic book store and actually bought a comic book was. I'm way behind on where I was on comics, and I'm buying them all digitally. So I think that, you know, you do need to keep the comics industry going because this is where the original ideas are developing from. But the question is, once you have some of these ideas, like, you know, where are the new DC characters that are going to take over for Batman and Wonder Woman and Superman and Aquaman and Green Lantern once we have figured out how to successfully get movies of all of them out there?
I can actually show you the last comic book I bought because I had it right next to me. And what a lame duck purchase this ended up being.
Is there anything about his background? I just want to know if there's background in that one instead of the movie. You know,
clearly the left hand was not talking to the right hand when that came out. And as beautiful a man as some people think Adam Driver is, he does not translate to illustration well.
All right.
Wow. That's harsh.
A strong statement.
That is harsh, sir.
Bam. Hey, driver. Bam. Well, speaking of that, real quick, if I can do a little promo, the first episode of Jedi Way is dropping tonight at midnight, as you guys know. So, and it's so funny you bring that up because we're talking about what is the one thing that brought us to Star Wars and keeps bringing us back to Star Wars. And
for you, it was Snoke.
And for me, it was absolutely Snoke.
Yeah,
Snoke
totally.
Diddy, as I call Diddy Pop, as is also known as well. But no, Laura Kelly's my co-host. She sent me the clip of The Force Awakens. That's what got her into Star Wars, The Force Awakens. So it's like the trailer. And I forget how good that teaser trailer was, the first one. And you hear Snoke, you know, there's been an awakening, and you're just like, oh man, this is gonna be awesome. And so you bring that up and you go, oh man, what could have been?
This new bad guy is gonna be so awesome, you guys. He's really gonna like.
It's Andy Serkis. Yeah. It's gonna be great.
God damn it!
Yeah,
damn it!
You would think after the lesson they learned with Darth Maul in Episode 1 to be like, God, okay, we got rid of him too soon for the movie. No. Don't do that again.
That being said, the throne room scene is a pretty awesome scene. All right. That's it. I think that's it for us here on the Geek Buddies for this week. Thank you all so much for watching.
To be continued post fandom.
Yeah, and we should maybe talk
about. Don't forget about the pen. Don't forget about the pen.
This pen is right here. We're putting this pen right here, and I'm pulling it out. When we get to the fandom.
Not so much here. Or here, more like in the middle here. And the thing that'll be interesting too, I think if I can convince Mike and Shannon maybe to find some time on the Sunday after the fandom event has happened, and we can maybe do a special episode of Geek Buddies where we talk about our reactions to everything that happened in time right afterwards, so it's a little more current. So we'll see.
Means I have to actually watch it.
Yes, you might have to watch some things. You can read about. Oh, it's so tough to watch free things. Oh my God! You know what?
Yes,
all right,
maybe. Maybe. Gotta check my quarantine schedule.
I can see the okay. I don't think we can reveal that though. I think we just got a text. I don't think we can reveal it on the show. So you want to take a look at that, Mike, and see if we should reveal it? You're the executive. You tell me.
Hold on.
I wouldn't.
Yeah. All right. Let's let it be. So we'll put a pin in that too.
For all of our fans, for everybody listening, this is what happens. We get these real-time updates from our friends, and then we decide if we can actually say it or not so that they'll still tell us things. Yep. That one, we can't tell you. We can't tell you yet.
Just in case. Just in case.
We have our sources, just letting you all know. All right. Anyway, that's it for us here on the Geek Buddies for this week. Shannon, tell them where they can find us and everything that's going on.
Yeah, if you'd like to follow us on social media, on Twitter, it's @geek_buddies. On Instagram, @the_geek_buddies. If you'd like to follow me on social media, on Twitter, it's @Shannon_McClung. On Instagram, @Shannon the Geek Buddy. If you'd like to follow Mr. Vogel, it's @MK2. And if you'd like to follow Mr. Rocha, it's @The Rocha Says.
And listen, we love having these conversations with you. We love you being here with us. We love that you listen to Shannon talk about his stupid Snoke comic.
Wow.
Like, it's lots of exciting stuff.
Wow.
And we want to keep. You know what?
Adam Driver apologist here. Okay. Go ahead. Yes.
So we want to keep the conversation going. You guys have been great. We've really enjoyed the comments. We've enjoyed the tweets. We've enjoyed everything. We want to keep it going. So the things that you can do for us is, first of all, hit like below on this video. If you're on YouTube, definitely subscribe to Rocha's page. Leave some comments. If you are listening to us on Anchor or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, definitely rate us, rank us, leave some comments. It helps us go up in the rankings, and more people will find us. And most importantly, share us on social media, talk about us on Twitter, post us on your Facebook pages, let people know that if they are geeky and they want to talk about geeky things, this is the place they should come, and that we're pretty fun and exciting guys to chat with.
Yeah. It's an authentically different show about the world of geekdom, and that's why we started it with someone who is on the inside at times, my man Michael Vogel, someone who's writing for the stuff in animation as well, Shannon McClung, and acting and stuff, and someone who's got his connections with people who have got sources through the business. So it's just like all three of us, two different points of views coming together. So share it, try to build the love up more, and get more buddies to come join us and watch us here on the show for sure. As Mike said, I can't reiterate it enough. Comments down below, likes, those are huge for this particular channel to rise up in visibility. So give it some love there as well.
Rise up.
That's right. Ichi, acha, acha. What does it mean? Rise. All right. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll talk to you next time with another brand new episode of the
Geek
Buddies. Hey!